The Galadari Hotel in Colombo, drawing more than 250 foreign and local delegates representing over 40 countries. A defense seminar organized under the banner Towards Lasting Peace and Stability by the Sri Lankan military from the 8th to the 10th of August, focusing on the 5 R's in post-war Sri Lanka: reconstruction, resettlement, rehabilitation, reintegration and reconciliation. The first day's deliberations were dedicated to the subject of reconstruction and resettlement. Gracing the occasion as the chief guest, Secretary to the Ministry of Defence, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, while commenting on the progress the government had made in terms of demining, reconstruction in the former LTTE-controlled areas, and resettlement of the internally displaced people, among other things, emphasized in particular the role the military played in achieving this.
The government intends to complete the resettlement of all IDPs by the middle of this month. Resettling nearly 300,000 internally displaced people in just 3 years is a very significant accomplishment. It would not have been possible without the professionalism and commitment of the military, which facilitated almost all the major undertakings involved. The overall number of troops in the north has also reduced by more than 21,000 since 2009. Troops will remain in strategic location for security purposes, but their presence will be non-intrusive. The day-to-day maintenance of law and order has already been handed over to the police. Restoring normalcy to the north and east as quickly as possible after the dawn of peace was an essential first step in this regard. Disarming the armed groups that had stood against the LTT in these areas during the war was very important. Members of groups such as the EPDP, EPRLF, Plot and TMVP had carried arms for self-protection against LTT attacks.
While acknowledging that disarming armed groups is paramount for the return to normalcy, the presence of the Sri Lankan armed forces is felt, however, not to interfere with this return.
Now, we are told that the army should withdraw entirely from the northern province. Here again, we make no bones about saying that it is not the intention of the government to do so. Indeed, it would be unpardonably reckless for the government of Sri Lanka even to contemplate such a course of action. History cannot be forgotten or wished away. We are doing two things. And one must remember, I would like to say by way of prefatory comment, that there is no discrimination or disparate treatment that is being meted out in this regard to the northern province.
There is a mismatch between what has been said here today and what these persons who come and speak to us have presented. For example, especially on the question of demilitarization in the north and on the question of the overbearing presence of the Sri Lankan Army, the visibility.
Though we are not getting involved in active military offensives, we have to, the primary task of the security forces is to see to that these elements will not regroup and engage in terrorist activities in these areas. So there are other basic requirements of security requirements for the military.
We are aware that winning the peace can be much more difficult than winning a conflict or a war. Peace in conflict areas is at best fragile and needs to be nurtured with caution, considering the stakes involved for all sections of the society. People will blame those in power for the death of their loved ones. whether their loved ones died of a bullet, lack of medical care, or even lack of potable water. What matters is that the government or the occupying forces, that is the other forces which come in, fail to prevent a preventable death. This leaves a mark on the psyche of the population.
While the first 2 days of the seminar was dedicated to reconstruction, resettlement, rehabilitation and reintegration and saw a large number of military personnel as speakers, the third day dedicated to reconciliation saw a better representation of civil administrators, but who also stressed on why and how the armed forces can in fact do more.
The title of my presentation is Reconciliation, How the Armed Forces Can Do More and Why They Should. And this might seem a paradox in the current context. I believe that more must be done by the armed forces, but I know that a great fuss is now being made about the role of the armed forces in the North. And though I can understand opposition to what might be termed militarization, which must be avoided, I sometimes feel that the formulaic approach of those concerned and opposed to the work of the armed forces is calculated almost to prevent reconciliation.
In direct focus of the theme of the day, however, comments were made by Dr. Subramaniam Swamy on the essentials of post-conflict resolution and India's concerns.
I am here to raise the questions of prerequisites or essential elements of reconciliation. The first essential component of reconciliation has to be necessarily that the Tamils of Sri Lanka must vocalize what they feel in their hearts and what they tell me in private, because I am also a Tamil. But the fact of the matter is that Tamils after Tamils tell me that they now are happy that their children are not going to be forcibly recruited by the LTT, that they can go to school and colleges, that their money is, that their paycheck is not sliced by extortion, that there's no uncertainty. There are, of course, they are not fully satisfied. They want certain expressions. They want to feel that they will not be marginalized in society.
There are many incidents relating to the war that are cause for concern and need to be addressed. In May 2010, the government appointed the Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission with the mandate to inquire into incidents which may have occurred between February 2002 and May 2009. Its recommendations, which were out in November 2011, is now set to be implemented by a presidential task force.
Over several meetings, a task force headed by me compiled the National Plan of Action to implement the recommendations of the LLRC to ensure the Cabinet mandate is given effect to. This plan of action was approved by the Cabinet of Ministers in July this year after 2 months of the appointment of the task force.
It is not something that the LLRC overlooked or ignored, but the question of accountability from a perspective of retributive justice is all that seems to occupy the minds of some of our interlocutors in the international community of nations. This appears to be the main thrust of their view in Sri Lanka's reconciliation process. While acknowledging that credible allegations must be looked into, the LLRC found specific information and referred it to the government for action. The government established tribunals within the scope of its military laws and is proceeding with these matters.
3 days of deliberating the achievements and challenges for lasting peace and stability in the country, led by the army, which has poised itself to play a key role in this regard. While this is commendable, it is imperative that Sri Lanka's journey towards lasting reconciliation should involve a more active and increased participation from civilians and civilian bodies for reconciliation to be meaningful and lasting.